Kính chào quý vị. Tôi là Vân Nhã Nguyễn ạ. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Vân Nhã Nguyễn of the Vietnamese Nationalist Party. Welcome and thank you for being with us today to discuss democracy for Vietnam, obstacles and opportunities. Our special thanks to the International IDEA for giving us the Alliance for Vietnam Democracy an opportunity to participate in today's conference to present the projects, activities, and actions we've taken and are achieved in pursuit of democracy for Vietnam. Next, I would like to hand the speakerphone over to Attorney Linh Nguyen, the moderator of today's conference. Thank you. Xin mời cô Linh.
Thank you, Ms. Vân Nhã. Thank you for the introduction. Welcome to the Global Democracy Coalition Forum. The International IDEA has convened this coalition forum to facilitate a global conversation on democracy as inputs to the Summit for Democracy convened by the United States government and to be held on the 9th and 10th of December 2021. The International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, International IDEA, is an intergovernmental organization that supports sustainable democracy worldwide. The title of this session is Democracy for Vietnam, Obstacles and Opportunities. In the next hour, we will cover 4 topics: a constitutional framework for a democratic future, a people's voice referendum on the South China Sea, a world's alliance denouncing a neighbor's genocide, and a nation's guarantee, human rights to secure and protect democracy. There will be a Q&A session at the end. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time. Our first speaker is Dr. Nhất Thiên Nguyen. Dr. Nguyen is a professor at the University of Houston downtown in the College of Public Service since 2011. His research includes constitutional and criminal justice law, innovation in policing. His interests are in promoting the integrity of Vietnam's East Sea and democracy for Vietnam. Dr. Nguyen is the president of the Vietnam Democracy Center, VDC, a nonprofit research and educational center with a focus on constitutional framework for a free and democratic Vietnam. VDC has published a model constitution for a democratic Vietnam and has promoted this constitution model to millions of Vietnamese. Please welcome Dr. Nguyen.
Thank you, Madam Linh Nguyen. I will present our presentation regarding the Constitution framework for a democratic future. Winston Churchill once said, "Democracy is the worst form of government, but the only one works." Oftentimes, we see many constitutions claiming to be democratic, look really good on paper, de jure. In reality, what actually happened de facto is far removed from the original framework of the Constitution. For that reason, I will go over some of the examples of de jure versus de facto Constitution. Subsequently, I will discuss about our model constitution for a democratic Vietnam by Vietnam Democracy Center. Many constitutions look good on paper. The current socialist Vietnamese constitution under Article 25 stated, "The citizens shall enjoy the right to freedom of opinion and speech and hold demonstration." In reality, Many protests against China encroachment into Vietnam's sea and land were brutally put down. In June 2018, the protests against the lease of Van Don to China for 99 years, resulting in hundreds of people being beaten and taken to jail. While the expatriate from the US, Will Nguyen, was severely beaten and taken into custody. Another example of de jure is the Republic of China Constitution, which guarantees freedom of religious belief. Article 36 promulgates citizens of the People's Republic of China enjoy freedom of religious belief. Yet, the Uyghur Muslim community in Xinjiang is forced to assimilate into the Han culture. Their mosques are destroyed and desecrated. Similarly, the Christian community is under complete control of the Chinese authority. Regarding the Russian and Chinese presidential election, they are a perfect example of de jure. Both constitutions have term limit on the presidency. However, both of them are loosely amended their constitution to allow their president to serve an almost unlimited term. Thus, what looked good on paper, de jure, is not what actually practiced de facto. Realize the importance of de facto constitution. Vietnam Democracy Center worked on a 2-year project on a constitution that promotes democracy, titled A Model Constitution for a Democratic Vietnam. It was written by a coalition of Vietnamese people from various backgrounds. It had an advisory process by constitutional experts. Additionally, this process is also extended to the common people in Vietnam to get their input. First, our Constitution, Section 2, Article 3, it advocates for the right to form political party. The plurality party system is in line with IDEA Global State of Democracy Report 2021, which recommends democracy at a minimum hold competitive election in which the opposition stands a realistic chance of accessing power. Secondly, to prevent the Constitution from being easily manipulated by the government in power, our model Constitution, Section 6, ensure that amendment to a Constitution will go through a rigorous 3-step process. 1, proposal, 2, decision and approval, and 3, enactment. As you can see on our presentation, it requires the approval from a Congress and the people through a referendum. Third, we post the Constitution article online by Facebook. There were approximately 3.1 million responses, with the approval rate of each article ranging from 87 to 97%. The book, A Model Constitution for Democratic Vietnam by Vietnam Democracy Center, is on Amazon. Thus, by getting buy-in from the Vietnamese people, the Constitution have a greater chance of becoming de facto Constitution. In conclusion, by advocating for the 3 principles, right to form political party, ensure the amendment to a constitution go through a political participation, and finally consensus from the stakeholder, we ensure that our constitution will actually be practiced de facto rather than just looking good on paper, de jure. Thus, practice what we preach is the basic tenet for the constitutional framework for a democratic future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen, for providing a basis for a constitutional framework for a democratic future and a free and fair election in which an individual can run for office or nominate a candidate, regardless of a party affiliation. Our next speaker is Professor Phan Thông Hưng. Professor Phan is the chairman of the board of directors for Vietnam Human Rights Day, May 11th, founder and advisor of the Republic of Vietnam Next Generations, the advisor and former president of the Board of Executives of the Federation of Vietnamese American Communities of the USA. Please welcome Professor Phan.
Thank you, Ms. Linh Nguyen. So before I started my presentation, I would like to show the slideshow first and then go along with my speech. So let me first of all, dear distinguished guests, Vietnam, with a population of more than 90 million, remain under the firm control of the Communist Party of Vietnam, CPV, the only legally recognized political party. It controls all decision-making and implementation of government policies, as well as the court. All print and broadcast media are regulated by the state, and the critical journalists are routinely harassed, detained, and jailed. According to Human Rights Watch, basic rights, including freedom of speech, opinion, press, and association, religions, are restricted. Right activists and bloggers face harassment, intimidation, physical assault, and imprisonment. Farmers lose land to development projects without adequate compensation, and workers are not allowed to form independent unions. The police use torture and beating to extract confessions. The criminal justice system lacks independence. During the COVID-19 pandemic, the Vietnam authority continued to harass, arrest, and imprison bloggers and activists based on bogus national security charges. Similarly, according to IDEA Global State of Democracy Indices and to Freedom House Report 2020, representative government and checks on government are two main troublesome areas need to be addressed. First of all, I would like to talk about representative government. There are two small problematic parts. First, free political parties. The Vietnam people have not had the right to organize in different political parties or other competitive political grouping of their choice. The CPV enjoys a monopoly on political powers, and no other parties are allowed to operate legally, and members of illegal opposition parties are subject to arrest and imprisonment. There's not a realistic opportunity for the opposition to increase its support or gain power through election. The structure of the one-party system precludes any democratic transfer of power. The Vietnam Fatherland Front, responsible for vetting all candidates for the National Assembly, is ostensibly an alliance of organizations representing the people, but in practice, it acts as an arm of the CPV. The people's political choice are not free from domination by force that are external to the political sphere. The overarching dominance of the CPV effectively excludes the public from any genuine and autonomous political participation. Various segments of the population include ethnic, racial, religious, gender, LGBTs, and other relevant groups do not have full potential rights and electoral opportunities. Other members of ethnic minority groups are nominally represented within the CPV, but they are rarely allowed to rise to senior position, and the CPV leadership dominance prevents effective advocacy on issues affecting minority populations. Vietnam has enacted policy and strategies aimed at boosting women's political participation, but in practice, the interests of women are poorly represented in the government. And Vietnam is ranked at 87 out of 156 countries in the World Economic Forum's Global Gender Gap Report 2021. Number 2, elected government. The current head of government or the chief national authority was not elected through free and fair election. The president is elected by the National Assembly for 5-year term and is responsible for appointed the prime minister, who is confirmed by the legislature. However, all selections for top executive posts are predetermined in practice by the CBV, Politburo, and Central Committee. According to Radio Free Asia, RFA, in the National Assembly 15, the results of the top 4 positions were elected with the notoriously high approval from 93.23% to 99.89%. The current national legislative representatives were not elected through free and fair election. For instance, elections to the National Assembly are tightly controlled by the CBV, which took 473 of the body's 500 seat maximum in the 2016 balloting. Candidates who were technically independent but vetted by the CBV took the other 21 seats filled that year. More than 100 independent candidates, including many young civil society activists, were barred from running in the election. The electoral laws and framework will not ensure that the CBV, the only legal recognized party, dominates every election. The party controls all electoral bodies and vets all candidates, result in disqualification for those who are generally independent. Number 2, we talk about check on government, and they also have 3 small problematic parts. First of all, media integrity. Journalists, bloggers, and human rights activists continue to face arrest, criminal conviction, and physical assault during the year. Although the Constitution recognizes freedom of the press, journalists and bloggers are constrained by numerous repressive laws and decrees. Those who dare to report or comment independently on controversial issues also risk intimidation and physical attack. The Criminal Code prohibits speech that is critical of the government, while a 2006 decree prescribes fines for any publication that denies revolution achievement, spread harmful information, or exhibit reactionary ideology. Decree 72, issued in 2013, gave the state sweeping new powers to restrict speech on blogs and social media. The state controls all print and broadcast media. Enforcement of the cybersecurity law that took effect in 2019 begin to seriously restrict online speech and access to uncensored news and information. It requires companies like Facebook and Google to store information about Vietnamese users in Vietnam and allow the government to block access to a broad range of contents that could be defined as dangerous to national security. New arrests, beaten criminal convictions, and cases of mistreatment in custody involve journalists and bloggers continue to be reported in 2020. Among other cases in July, and in July 2020, the well-known writer and journalist Phạm Đoan Trang ended her association with her publisher due to what she claimed was intense police harassment. And Trang was arrested on October 6, 2020, last year, on charge of propaganda against the state, which carries a prison term of up to 20 years. Number 2, judicial independence. The judiciary is subservient to the CBV, which control the cost at all levels. This control is especially evident in political sensitive criminal prosecution. The CBV and government leaders have acknowledged growing public discontent with corruption, and there has been increase in corruption-related arrests in recent years. Despite the crackdown, enforcement of anti-corruption laws is generally selective and often linked to political rivalries. Many top officials who have been detained or jailed belong to a different political faction than General Secretary Nguyễn Phú Trọng size. The CBV does not tolerate journalists, investigation, independent courts, and other autonomous bodies that may serve as a check on corruption. Due process does not have prevailed in civil and criminal matters. Constitutional guarantee of due process are generally not upheld. Defendants have legal right to counsel, but lawyers are scarce and many are reluctant to take on cases involving human rights or other sensitive topics. Defense lawyers do not have the right to call witnesses and often report insufficient time to meet with their clients. In national security cases, police can detain suspects for up to 20 months without access to counsel. Amendment to the Penal Code that took effect in 2018 include a provision under which defense lawyers can be held criminally liable for failing to report certain kinds of crimes committed by their own clients. Number 3, effective parliament. The CBV leadership, which is not freely elected or accountable to the public, determine government policy and legislative agenda. The government does not operate with openness and transparency. The National Assembly passed an access to the information law in 2016, but its provisions are relatively weak. Information can also be withheld if it is deemed to threaten state interests or the well-being of the nation. Independent journalists and civil society groups are not permitted to scrutinize or critique government activities. In conclusion, democracy and human rights are essential for providing people living in poverty and under oppression with power, voice, and choice to improve their living conditions. Support to democracy and human rights play a fundamental role in combating oppression, building democracies, and reducing poverty in all its dimensions. The CBV democracy should be guided by the principle that human rights are universal, interdependent, and indivisible in the future to gain trust and support from overseas and international communities. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Phan. Indeed, human rights is an important tool in all sustainable bilateral relationship based on rule of laws and good faith. Thank you for the topic, A Nation's Guarantee. Human rights is an important tool to secure and protect democracy. Our next speaker is Mr. Oanh Pham. Mr. Pham is an award-winning scientist, 3 times winner of the 3M Technical Excellence Award with several patents in the medical laser dry view technology. He is a respected speaker on diversity, youth, cultural, and leadership topics. He is the Executive Council and co-founder of the Asian Pacific Policy Roundtable, President and Chairman of the Vietnamese Community of Minnesota. He received leadership awards from the American Institute of Chemist Leadership, MPAAT Service Award, Chamber of Commerce Service Award, Vietnamese Community of Minnesota Leadership Awards, Family Federation of World Peace, and Unification of Minnesota Leadership Award, You have the floor, Mr. Pham.
Thank you. Greeting and good evening from Minnesota of America. It is my honor and pleasure to share with you the rather unique and unusual voice of the Vietnamese people living in areas facing the ever increasingly belligerent invading military activity by the Chinese government against its neighboring nation in the South China Sea region, most aggressively toward Vietnam, its southern neighbor and former ally. Over the past decades, Chinese forces had attacked Vietnamese soldiers protecting the islands and facilities built 100 years ago in South China Sea, illegally occupied and took ownership of Vietnam territory and those facilities, causing great property damage and life lost. On top of that, the Chinese had continuously been stopping, harassing, harming, and killing innocent Vietnamese fishermen and or destroy their livelihood. Many, if not all of you, probably already knew that Vietnam is currently still under the Communist Party rule, and people of Vietnam are not allowed to voice any disagreement with the ruling authority, risking great harm, physically or financially, or both, done to themselves. Despite such potential threats and harms, thousands of Vietnamese had, on several occasions, risked everything, taken to the street, demonstrating against the Chinese aggression and invasion of Vietnam's territory. Many of those brave Vietnamese have suffered severe bodily injuries and or very long imprisonment in the hand of the Vietnamese government, their very own. It is very clear that the Vietnamese government has silently sided with the Chinese Communist Party in its invasion and other illegal activities against Vietnamese territory and people. The brutal treatments and crackdown by the government on the citizen essentially muffle and silence the voice of any Vietnamese unhappy with the aggression and bullying behavior of the Chinese government toward Vietnam and Vietnamese people. This anti-democratic policy of the Vietnamese government, along with numerous examples of human rights violation, some has been cited previously by Professor Thiên Nguyen and Hung Phan, however, have served as strong catalysts and prompted the 86 organizations from all over the world to sponsor and administer the referendum on South China Sea, asking participants whether Vietnam should take legal action against China in international courts. This referendum was open from May to August of 2020 and provided much greater number of Vietnamese people a platform to voice their opinion directly. There was a few instances reported regarding threats and harassment to the participant by the government official. But in general, the referendum was carried out safely and successfully with very inspiring and reassuring outcome. About 1.2 million Vietnamese have participated in the referendum, with 95% of them approved in favor of taking legal action against China in international courts. The referendum had the participation of people from all 68 provinces and cities of Vietnam, with a good mix of all ages from 16 and up. The largest number and ratio of participants were from Hanoi and border provinces with China. The results from this referendum have been disseminated widely through an online roundtable conference in mid-September of 2020, attended by many representatives of the press and leaders of the free world. It has generated very strong international support, echoing the voice of millions of oppressed Vietnamese. Since Hanoi or the Vietnamese government took no legal action against China, despite such overwhelmingly strong voice of the people, this again shows a tie between the two governments, or Hanoi is greatly influenced and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party in acting against the public sentiment, suppressing the outcry of the Vietnamese people. The fact that over 1 million Vietnamese have risked their own safety to participate in the demonstration and voice their opinion through the referendum under the oppressive communist system is not only unique and inspiring, it also clearly demonstrates the fundamental and universal human need for a democratic society in which elected leaders listen and carry out the will of the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pham. Thank you for your in-depth view of the People's Voice referendum on the South China Sea. Dr. David Tran will present the last topic, A World's Alliance, Denouncing a Neighbor's Genocide. Dr. Tran is a practicing child and adolescent psychiatrist in the United States for the last 25 years. He is a recipient of the American Medical Association Leadership Award and several AMA's Physician Recognition Awards. Dr. Tran is a former clinical assistant professor at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. He is the coordinator for the Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy. Please welcome Dr. Tran.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for allowing me here today. A democratic Vietnam needs to form alliances with other free and democratic countries to stop this expansion of totalitarianism in Asia and the rest of the world. We need to look at the CCP's treatment of their minority populations of Xinjiang and Tibet to visualize a world under China's control. We believe that building an alliance against China's genocide and other crimes against humanity is a part of the defense of democracy. We've led a coalition of more than 160 international organizations to designate the Chinese Communist Party a transnational criminal organization. This was later organized into a movement to denounce the CCP for its genocide of the Uyghurs and other Turkish minorities in Xinjiang. We promoted this with then U.S. Secretary Mike Pompeo and his delegate ambassador amongst 10 of the Office of Global Criminal Justice. On January 19, 2021, Secretary Pompeo announced that the CCP was committing genocide of the Uyghurs. We were also working concurrently on the Canadian Parliament to promote the same designation since as early as October 2020. Since then, a resolution designating China's genocide was passed by the House of Commons Subcommittee on International Human Rights, and later on overwhelmingly by the whole House on February 23rd, 2021. With its new administration, the U.S. State Department's Office of Legal Advisor concluded initially that the evidence was insufficient to prove genocide. We then organized a major online event to publicize the CCP's practice of organ harvesting. It has the participation of 9 parliamentary houses, 6 governments, 66 organizations, and 19 academic institutions. This effort helped to push the U.S. State Department, a participant of the conference, over the finish line and confirmed the genocide determination. It has also generated a bicameral, bipartisan legislation in the U.S. Congress to stop this barbaric practice of forced organ harvesting. Our efforts in the UK Parliament and in the EU have yielded similar results. Both the UK House of Lords and House of Commons passed resolutions condemning the genocide in Xinjiang. Legislatures in several other countries have passed similar non-binding motions marking China's actions as the genocide, including the Dutch Parliament, the Czech Senate, and the Seimas of Lithuania. Other parliaments, such as those in New Zealand and Belgium, condemned the Chinese government's treatment of Uyghurs as severe human rights abuses or crimes against humanity. We are also focusing on promoting a boycott of the 2022 Beijing Olympics, which is used as a tool to legitimize the system of government and the abuses of its people. The effort is currently supported by an alliance of 114 organizations and 378 parliamentarians from 12 Winter Olympic countries, which support moving the 2022 Olympic Games. The Uyghur Tribunal is an independent people's tribunal based in the United Kingdom that aims to examine the evidence regarding China's human rights abuses against the Uyghur and to evaluate whether the abuses constitute genocide under the Genocide Convention. The tribunal is chaired by Sir Jeffrey Nice, the lead prosecutor in the trial of Slobodan Milosevic. Our representative has provided expert witnesses to the tribunal. We are also organizing an online conference to publicize the tribunal's judgment on January 12, 2022, with Sir Jeffrey as our keynote speaker. It is our belief that a slow genocide is also being perpetrated on the people of Vietnam by the CCP, with the complicity of the VCP, the Vietnamese Communist Party. The building of large and unnecessary Chinese dams is devastating to the Mekong River and killing off the food supply of tens of millions of Vietnamese. Thus, it could possibly meet criteria B and C of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention. B is the causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, and C is deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. Stopping China's genocide is humanity's responsibility, and we are rising to the challenge. It is also Vietnamese authorities a measure of legitimacy, and so far they have shown that they are not legitimate. Thank you, and I will give the floor back to the moderator.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. Endearingly, the Vietnamese people call each other Đồng Bào, people of the same pouch. The legend of the union of Lạc Long Quân and Âu Cơ told of 100 eggs in a common pouch, representing 100 children, 100 tribes, 100 voices, and a celebration of diversity of people, culture, and ideas. Today, we stand with our brothers and sisters in Xinjiang. There is no place in our human family for genocide or forced organ harvesting. Now we come to the question and answer session. Please submit your questions. Our panelists include Professor Tin Nguyen, PhD, President of Vietnam Democracy Center, Mr. Oanh Phat of Thắng Nghĩa Forum, Dr. David Tran, MD, Coordinator, Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy, Professor Hung Phan, President of the Vietnam Human Rights Bill Advocacy Committee. Let's begin with our first question. And please go ahead and place your question in our Q&A box. How should we deal with the rising atrocities like China and Vietnam? Will any one of you want to take on this first question? Dr. Tran, would you like to take this first question?
I think it begins with having the right perception. I think that about 2,500 years ago, a very wise man in Asia say that in order to have the right action, you have to have the right perception. I think we're dealing here with a totalitarian system of government, talking about Vietnamese and Chinese. And it wants to control the people, and in the case of China, to take over the world. And we don't want the same thing. I mean, the free world, we don't want the same thing. So it's not a competition. We're not competing with them for this purpose. And we didn't compete with Hitler, and we're not competing with Xi and Putin. They are our enemies. So you also have to know your friends. I think the difference between autocracy and democracies is also in the prefix. It's the people. We have to make efforts to engage with the 1.4 billion Chinese people and 100 million Vietnamese people. They have to know that we are with them in their struggles for freedom and human dignity. We also have to use all the tools that are available to us. I think that to engage the people, we have at our disposal weapons that are these autocratic regimes that are more afraid of than nuclear weapons. Is the free and open internet, and we have to make it accessible to everybody through cellular internet, for example, and other technologies. I think it's expensive, but the benefits are huge. You know, it's not just for democracy, but it's also for health, economic, and all kind of other reasons. And after we make it free, we have to make it open. Our problems with having freedom or not having freedom of expression in Vietnam is not just the Vietnamese government or Vietnamese authorities. It's also American companies like Facebook and Google, and they're doing a very good job at helping the authorities there censoring the content and cracking down on dissent. So, and there's no reason why that should be allowed.
Thank you, Dr. Tran. We have another question. How can we advance Vietnam's democracy? Mr. Who would like to take this question?
Yes, it's Tim Nguyen. I would like to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Having a constitutional framework for a democratic Vietnam is important because it gives a vision of what democracy can bring to the people. Building alliance with other like-minded organizations and entities, Vietnamese and internationally, as a threat of communism and totalitarianism is worldwide. So its response also needs to be cooperative and international. COVID-19 and the ongoing genocide have shown that the world is no longer the same. We can only be safe if every one of us is safe. That concludes my answer to that question.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Nguyen.
I think I can add to that.
Yes, please go ahead.
I think there are at least 3 areas to focus on. First, pushing for protection of human rights. Here in the US, it can be accomplished through legislation and sanction. Travel bans and financial restrictions are important measures. Second, promoting political participation to free and fair election. Declaring election illegal or questionable have powerful consequences. Words are very important. Why call somebody president when he was not really elected by the people? Through internet technology, allow for survey and referendum that can have participation of millions of people. And this go back to the free and open internet discussed before. And third, fighting corruption. These autocrats want power, but they also want money. And they want their children to go to Harvard, Oxford, or any prestigious institution in the West. They don't leave money in Vietnam because they know they are on borrowed time. So they send their money overseas. So if we seriously want to fight corruption, we can confiscate the money and give it back to the people. It's blood money. It's their blood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pham. We have another set of questions. And they are individuals free to practice and express their religious faith in Vietnam? Professor Pham, would you like to take that question?
You on mute, Professor Pham.
Sorry. Yes. Everyone can hear me? Yes. So first of all, I'd like to talk about Vietnamese people. And everyone should know that Vietnamese people see religions as part of Vietnamese traditions. And since the 1975, when the communists took over the South, they banned all the forms of religions and used spies and tapped the phone of priests in church and bronzes in Buddhist temple. Okay, and so far, religious freedom remains restricted, and we know that all religious groups and most individual clergy members are required to join the party controls. So it means what? The state will control every activities of religions. And based on the 2016 law of belief and religion, the CBV reinforced the restoration requirement and allow extensive state interfere with religious group, internal affair, and gay authorities broad description to paralyze unsanctioned religious activities. All unregistered and unrecognized religious groups face routine harassment, include violence, criminal charges, and property damage. That's how they control the religions in Vietnam right now.
Staying with the freedom, I would like to have a follow-up question with you, Professor Pham. Yes. Do you think there's a freedom for non-governmental organizations, particularly those that are engaged in human rights?
You asked the same questions. I think there's no freedom for those activities, especially for human rights organizations, generally banned, and those who engage in any advocacy that authority think is a hostile risk imprisonment. And according to Freedom House report, criminal prosecutions and violence against activists persist in 2020. And last year, in July, a court imposed lengthy prison term on 8 activists who had planned protests calling for the protection of constitutional rights on National Day in 2018. And also in July, a court sentenced a prominent pro-democracy activist to 8 years in prison for his anti-government posts on Facebook only. So the way is the way, the government control the only human rights activities right now in Vietnam.
There's a couple more questions. I would throw it out for everybody to answer this that's in the panel. What is the best way to fight corruption from within Vietnam? CSOs in Vietnam faced extreme censorship and fear for speaking out against corruption for fear of retribution. Are there ways for CSOs or individuals to address the issue of corruption in Vietnam? So basically it's wanting to see who would like to take this. Anybody raise their hands? Mr. Pham? would you like to take this question?
I think that is a very difficult question. It's not for the people from outside of the country to know the detail of what involved, because the corrupted people are also most likely the powerful people. And if you're not careful, you will be silent one way or the other. So I think the best still, if those abuses can be somehow sent out to the free world, that can be broadcast secondhand, that will be most effective and safe for people who are suffering or who want to improve the condition inside Vietnam. That's all I can think of at the moment, but I think that's a very delicate matter. There is corruption in the West also, but it's not so bad and it's not so brutal when it comes to retribution.
Professor Nguyen, how do you think in a constitutional framework, how would that help with fighting corruption in Vietnam?
Well, having a constitutional framework is important because
it provides check and balance.
Yeah, it's a check and balance because, for example, the U.S. have a very fair system for outside people to invest in the U.S. However, as you can see, the Chinese and the Vietnamese communists are notorious for taking over assets in the U.S. by buying up property and the business investment over here. So my suggestion is, even though our constitution is very fair, treat everybody equally, but we need to look into how this money will obtained and how they will use this property, because actually a lot of them use their investment as a way to send their children, their relatives to come to the U.S., taking advantage of our free system, while in the meantime in Vietnam or China oppress their own people.
Thank you. We have another question in the audience. What do you think regional organizations like ASEAN, where Vietnam is a member, could do in support of promoting democracy in Vietnam? How do you think ASEAN can support the advancement of democracy in Vietnam? Any hands on this? Mr. Professor Phan, would you like to take a stab on this?
Right now, I don't have the questions for that one. But I think in terms of democracy, we need to have some kind of power of the people, and the government has to think the people is the main purpose for them to support, not to use them as like some kind of basis things for them to do. And right now they have to support their own people, and they have to use this as the fundamental principle to help them, not like to use them as like a slave and to whatever they want to do. In terms of Vietnamese people right now, they cannot raise their voice. They have no opportunities for them to speak up. So that's why, okay, for me, very important for the democracy have to develop, okay, from the basics, the bottom, and hopefully they have to change the system. But in some days, it's very hard to do that.
Thank you so much, Professor Pham. Dr. Tran, did you have your hands raised?
Just quickly, I think that ASEAN hasn't shown to be a good medium for promoting democracy, and I think we've seen that with other countries like Myanmar. But I think that it can still be an effective tool. I think that a lot of the countries, especially democratic countries in the ASEAN, needs to realize that promoting democracy in the region is important, not just for countries like Vietnam, but also for themselves. I think together a democratic ASEAN would be a much better economic and security forum for every countries involved. And I think it makes sense to build a free and open Indo-Pacific when all the people in ASEAN countries are free and their societies are open.
Right. I think we have one last question, and we probably just have time for one last questions. Would any of you have any suggestion for the Summit of Democracy? Dr. Tran, would you like to tackle this question?
Let me tackle that, and then maybe other people can help me out. I think that I think this is just the first step, and I think that a summit like the one that this administration is trying to put together, I think after that there needs to be an alliance of democracies, more than just a summit. It needs to be some kind of organization where other countries can be, other democratic country can be a part of. And I think right now we're dealing with a top-down approach where governments are being asked to come. But I think that if we can combine that with a bottom-up approach, where the people, which is the engine of democracy, through civil societies and organizations, can be involved as the stakeholders. I think there's also needs to have technological support for democracy. And I think we're dealing with China, which put a lot of money into technology to control the people and to suppress the democracy.
I think there's bilateral relationship based on rule of laws and good faith.
It needs to be countered.
Thank you for the topic, A Nation's Guarantee. We need to invest human rights R&D is an important tool to help secure and protect democracy.
And
our next speaker is Mr. Oing
better regulations for technologies like AI and
an award-winning scientist, 3 times winner of the 3M Technical Excellence Award with several patents in the medical,
control people,
laser-derived view technology. He is a respected speaker on diversity, youth, thank you so much, and I think cultural and leadership topics. And we would end with the executive council and closing remarks. Thank you, panelists, for an insightful discussion on the advancement of democracy and chairman of the Vietnamese community of Minnesota. During the last few centuries, he received leadership awards from the American Institute of Chemist Leadership with political systems of democracy, focus on the people's voice, Chamber of Commerce Service Award. A constitution Vietnamese community of Minnesota that the Communist Party as the sole form of government, federation, totalitarian regime, and unification of Minnesota Leadership Award. Tramples on human rights and religious freedom. Indoctrinates that the Communist Party is higher than God and above all religion.
From Minnesota of America.
The Vietnamese civilization is grounded
on
the principle of human rights.
To share with you
of the people, by the people, and for
unusual
the
voice.
Everyone
of the
has a voice.
People.
The voices must be heard,
areas
not oppressed or silenced.
Increasingly
in today's multilateralism world, we speak of
military
freedom of
activity
speech,
by the
press,
Chinese government
association,
against
religion,
its
and
neighboring nation
self-determination.
in the South China
And human
Sea
rights
region.
is
Most
a key
aggressively
ingredient
toward
to
Vietnam,
advance democracy
its
in
southern
Vietnam.
neighbor and former
For our
ally.
đồng bào to enjoy
Over the
democracy,
past
it
decades,
begins with free and fair
Chinese
elections,
forces had
with
attacked
the right to run
Vietnamese
for
soldiers,
office
protecting
and the right to
the
nominate
islands and
candidates
facilities
with a diversity of
built
ideas
100 years
and
ago
political
in South China Sea,
affiliations. A
illegally
democratic
occupied
Vietnam
and
is
took
the very
ownership
principle on
of
which
Vietnam
Vietnam was
territory
founded
and those facilities,
4,900 years
causing
ago.
great property
Lastly,
damage
we thank the
and lives
International
lost.
IDEA
On
for
top
this
of that,
Global Democracy
the
Coalition
Chinese
Forum.
had
Thank you so much for your
continuously been
participation,
stopping,
and we hope that
harassing,
you have a
harming,
wonderful
and
day or
killing
evening where
innocent
you are, wherever
Vietnamese
you are,
fishermen
and we hope that you
or
will
destroy their
continue
livelihood.
to promote a democratic
Many, if not
Vietnam.
all of
Thank you.
probably already know that Vietnam is currently still under the Communist Party rule, and people of Vietnam are not allowed to voice any disagreement with the ruling authority, risking great harm, physically or financially, or both, done to themselves. Despite such potential threats and harms, thousands of Vietnamese have, on several occasions, risked everything, taken to the street, demonstrating against the Chinese aggression and invasion of Vietnam's territory. Many of those brave Vietnamese have suffered severe bodily injuries and or very long imprisonment in the hand of the Vietnamese government, their very own. It is very clear that the Vietnamese government has silently sided with the Chinese Communist Party in its invasion and other illegal activities against Vietnamese territory and people. The brutal treatments and crackdown by the government on the citizen essentially muffle and silence the voice of any Vietnamese unhappy with the aggression and bullying behavior of the Chinese government.
Indeed, human rights is an important tool in all sustainable bilateral relationship based on rule of laws and good faith. Thank you for the topic, A Nation's Guarantee. Human rights is an important tool to secure and protect democracy. Our next speaker is Mr. Oanh Pham. Mr. Pham is an award-winning scientist, 3 times winner of the 3M Technical Excellence Award, with several patents in the medical laser drive view technology. He is a respected speaker on diversity, youth, cultural, and leadership topics. He is the Executive Council and co-founder of the Asian Pacific Policy Roundtable, President and Chairman of the Vietnamese community of Minnesota. He received leadership awards from the American Institute of Chemist Leadership, MPAAT Service Award, Chamber of Commerce Service Award, Vietnamese Community of Minnesota Leadership Awards, Family Federation of World Peace, and Unification of Minnesota Leadership Award. You have the floor, Mr. Pham.
Thank you. Greeting and good evening from Minnesota of America. It is my honor and pleasure to share with you the rather unique and unusual voice of the Vietnamese people living in areas facing the ever increasingly belligerent invading military activity by the Chinese government against its neighboring nation in the South China Sea region, most aggressively toward Vietnam, its southern neighbor and former ally. Over the past decades, Chinese forces had attacked Vietnamese soldiers protecting the islands and facilities built 100 years ago in South China Sea, illegally occupied and took ownership of Vietnam territory and those facilities, causing great property damage and life lost. On top of that, the Chinese had continuously been stopping, harassing, harming, and killing innocent Vietnamese fishermen and or destroy their livelihood. Many, if not all of you, probably already knew that Vietnam is currently still under the Communist Party rule, and people of Vietnam are not allowed to voice any disagreement with the ruling authority, risking great harm, physically or financially, or both, done to themselves. Despite such potential threats and harms, thousands of Vietnamese had, on several occasions, risked everything, taken to the street, demonstrating against the Chinese aggression and invasion of Vietnam's territory. Many of those brave Vietnamese have suffered severe bodily injuries and or very long imprisonment in the hand of the Vietnamese government, their very own. It is very clear that the Vietnamese government has silently sided with the Chinese Communist Party in its invasion and other illegal activities against Vietnamese territory and people. The brutal treatments and crackdown by the government on the citizen essentially muffle and silence the voice of any Vietnamese unhappy with the aggression and bullying behavior of the Chinese government toward Vietnam and Vietnamese people. This anti-democratic policy of the Vietnamese government, along with numerous examples of human rights violation, some has been cited previously by Professor Thiên Nguyen